heads of education. That bit had really grabbed hold of me. And when I was when I worked for the Oxfordshire FA, it was very much in a coach education position, and then did some national delivery as well with the Football Association across the country, and something that I really enjoyed, and ended up doing a range of different course programs, both well, I think all the way through the spectrum, within the youth side, and obviously initially through that generic pathway of probably C license, B license, A license, pro license, and some of the education pathway as well. But yeah, for me that was probably a real good learning opportunity to sort of see the game from a different perspective, and how I develop the individuals that are going to have the biggest impact on the players.
Yeah, and that was, you joined the FA, I think, was it just after when we first started the A license? Was that too?
Oh, I'd already been involved with them prior to us meeting, and I'd had a full-time role with one of the county associations. So I'd worked there, looking at probably the range of probably the full spectrum of football, so male and female game, grassroots, elite. So that gave me a really good grounding. I then went into Oxford, and then sort of balanced really my full-time role, doing coaching and education with that as a coach educator. So all of my weekends were Saturdays, Sundays, actually going out and delivering coach education sessions, and watching coaches work firsthand. And I think at that point I probably started to really understand how important it was to build relationships with people, rather than just the quality of the delivery, that actually to really have an impact and have that transfer of knowledge, I've got to really engage that person and build a really strong relationship with them. That's probably that realization. Even after having worked with players, it just seemed a more natural process when I worked as a coach educator and working with coaches.
Right. And then you started because I was looking at obviously your career and the education kind of side by side with one another. And it was at Loughborough you went first. I mean, obviously after the education before that, but
probably the first part was at Warwick University.
Yeah.
So I went to Warwick University and had the opportunity to do my teacher training, which I think just was a good fit in terms of being a coach educator, and I was working full time with the players as well around their education, and obviously coaching at the same time. So I was getting lots of different experiences around being a teacher. So I had the opportunity to go and do my teacher training at Warwick University, which was excellent. Obviously I was the oldest person on the course. A lot of the group had come through and had completed their university studies and gone on a pathway to become a teacher. But yes, that was my first sort of I would say that the first real academic qualification that I really felt engaged with. I'd never been that great at school. My full focus was on I'm going to be a player, and didn't probably realise the benefits of what the benefit that education would bring to that, in terms of just being a really effective learner. So I would say the first time that I've really engaged with being academic study was doing my teacher training, and recognizing that actually this is going to be hugely beneficial to me as an individual, but also to the people that I'm working with. I think probably when I was a player and started out as a coach, I was probably quite selfish. It was definitely about me, and where this was going to take me. And when I did my teacher training, I'd certainly got an eye on, it's definitely going to develop me, but also the people that I work with, the players, the coaches, this is going to have a beneficial effect on them as well. So I think at that point, I'd really started that reflection process in terms of developing as an individual.
Yeah. And how hard was it to do, you know, from obviously your full-time working in the game, and then also the education on the side? How difficult was that? Because you went then from Warwick to Loughborough, didn't you? And then at one point, is there a bit of a crossover when you started the pro license as well?
Yeah, so it was almost I call it a sort of a flip in the switch moment, where I think because I'd never been academically that strong at school, and it had always been about me being a footballer, and obviously your friends tell you you're a good footballer. You go to school and everyone just sort of says, oh, your brains are in your feet, they're not in your head. And you get into that sort of fixed mindset, I think, of actually going, oh, you know, I'm not the brightest tool, but you know, hopefully I'll get something out of the game, and I'll put everything there. And I think I went through a sort of, you know, this sort of flipping the switch moment when I went to Warwick. Of actually, I feel like I'm quite switched onto this. I'm doing quite well, and I started getting some really good grades, and I felt really comfortable in the environment, and they probably challenged me a little bit as well, sort of pushed me to present and to be open when I speak, and that was probably a sort of flipping the switch moment. And then I went through I think when I'd left that course and was like, right, actually, I'm going to make this part of my development, that actually I'm not just going to do football-based or practical elements of my development. I'm now going to look at academia as well and what that can give to me. And I went through a stage of probably not finding a course that I went, right, that is for me. That's exactly what I want to do. There was sort of little bits everywhere. And Chris Cushion at Loughborough University said there was an opportunity to go and do some of the modules on the master's program at Loughborough. So I took him up on that opportunity, and this was sort of when I'd gone to Leicester. I made that transition, and I think I just made a sort of conscious decision in my mind that actually you need to remain, you know, I need to have that academic stimulant as well as the coaching part. Mm-hmm. And you know, I'm still probably one of those people that you know, I sit and listen and observe, and I have to go away and really think about it and research something. But I think what that did was it almost sort of grabbed hold of my imagination and sort of said, right, actually, this is something that's really interesting. And you know, I wanted to know that, and the teacher training especially, because a lot of it is around the psychology of the person, the relationship you build with them, how you engage them, and I could really sort of understand how that was important to the game and my development as a coach as well.
Yeah, it's interesting today you say that. I mean, because I was thinking today, I can't remember what actually triggered that. It was around. You get a lot of coaches who'll say, you know, you look at the physical side of the game, the technical side mostly, and then some of the tactical work. And you've got players there who hit all them three boxes, but then they you know, they're missing that part where they, you know, maybe don't have the drive, the determination, the grit, whatever you want to call it. But you know, I feel that it's connecting with those players. You know, that's your job. More of the psychological side, particularly it's been probably neglected, isn't it, in the past, and trying to really get that out. As much as you feel you might be a coach, you know, on the grass, but it's really trying to get the best out of people and trying to find that bit in them that. And the reason was I was thinking my son's very young, but I was just thinking for him in the future, because he was being a little bit lazy, and I think, well, if he's a bit lazy at 3, what's he going to be like when he's older, you know? And I was thinking, you know, it's our job. You hear it a lot where coaches say, well, yeah, that's up to him, but he's got to decide. Well, really, it's maybe sometimes it's you bringing that out of him and finding that character within him, and so it does give him a bit of discipline. And there's obviously the balance with that. Speaking to Lee Hendry on the webinar a while back, and he was saying about what his dad, if he didn't have his dad there with him to be quite strong with him.
Yep.
So that psychological side, I imagine, is very strong for you.
Yeah, I think the bit for me that probably stood out was, and obviously the FA brought a number of qualifications out around sort of developing young players, and you know, they've got that youth pathway, and part of that was developing the environment. And when I sort of reflect on that time doing my teacher training, I think the environment that they created was unbelievable for me as a person. If I think about school, there was definitely a fear of saying the wrong thing, or and whether that was the fixed mindset thing, I'm not too sure. But the environment they created when I did my teacher training certainly made me feel really comfortable to be expressive, ask questions, and you know, when I think about people working with young players and just making sure that they get that right for the individual. So whether that's and sometimes that's to challenge, sometimes that is to make it feel a little bit uncomfortable. Other times it's to make them feel really comfortable. It depends on your personality, your circumstances, the context that you're in. But I think that was probably a standout bit for me, that it really sort of gave me that opportunity, and I started really recognizing some of my own qualities, some of my own faults where I needed to develop, and a lot of my work has been about that since that point, where I've really looked at even though it's sort of taken a different path and I'm now not working with the player on the pitch, it's very much around, right, well, how do I develop the people that are influencing the players? Okay, what does that look like? And I think even when I've worked through the clubs that I've been in, it's been very much that. I think the nice bit would have been to have gone out on the grass as a coach and worked with them, and you know, you're in a role where you've probably got that opportunity because you're the senior person at, you know, at the academy. You could go and work with any team, or but it's probably recognizing, right, what's required at this particular point at this particular time is very important. But that bit around, right, well, how do I influence and develop the people that are working with the players? I think that's sort of what I took out, and I'll continue to do that. I think the academia bit will not stop for me. I've just completed a course with Oxford University, which has been excellent around the executive leader and what they look like, and it's very similar to what I did on the teacher training. It's just at a different level, and you probably go a little bit more in depth because of the university that I was working with. So no, the academia bit for me is something that will travel along and continue on the journey.
Brilliant. And then from jumping back into club football with Bristol City, then from the FA to Bristol City, and how was that?
Yeah, so Bristol City was my first opportunity to be an academy director, and be at you know, you're at the top of the tree in terms of the academy. I think one of the sort of important lessons for me was the realization that you don't know it all, and there's a number of experts in the building that you need to recognize them for that skill set, and they are the expert in that field. And it's really about how you support, develop that person to again get the best out of the players. And there was a real temptation, I think, when I first went into, you know, like I say, to go and coach and work with the players. And I think that for me was probably a real, and I was only there 12 months. There was a real lesson in the job. It was almost like my work experience before I went to Leicester.
Yeah.
Just to understand the club, the context, understand people, what they can bring, and but a thoroughly enjoyable 12 months. We had I was quite fortunate the year before I went to Bristol, when I was at Leicester as head of education and coach education. We'd won the championship and been promoted to the Premier League, and then I went to Bristol City, and they were a League One club, and we had 12 months of really big success, where the club got promoted to the championship. We won the Johnson's Paint Trophy, and it was almost a celebration year. So in terms of like running an academy, it was great because we'd got absolute engagement from the players and the staff, and obviously you know, what the first team does influences that hugely. If you're getting success and you know, the players are striving to be part of that, there's that domino effect all the way down the club. So it was a fantastic year, and obviously I got to work with some different types of people that I'd been before. Obviously Steve Cottrell, the manager, was really interesting to work with. He was quite demanding and challenging, but some fantastic ideas of you know, when I look back at, you know, tactically some of the things that he talked about, I was just like, you know, it was a complete wow moment for me. I think I'd got the bit around technically and developing really young players, but the tactical part, he, you know, some of the things that he talked about and the things that I saw him do with players, it was a very wow moment. But on the other hand, he was very demanding as well, and so it was really good. But I think when I went in there, I think I'd already had that moment of, right, how do I develop the staff, and their responsibility is to develop the players. They're the specialists, they're the experts. How do I develop this staff? And that's something that I did feel that something that I had accomplished when I left after the 12 months. It was right, okay, well, we've promoted someone internally to be the academy director now. I feel like he's grown as a person, and felt he could really drive the club forward. There was actually an interim spell where someone else came into post, and he came later, but I felt I'd promoted him into a position where he could step in to be the next academy director or academy manager. And hopefully the staff felt I was influential at that time. But there was probably a big draw for me because I'd got the opportunity to go back to Leicester during that year. And then when we came to the end of the season, and even though we were on a high, I think there was a real desire to go back to Leicester. I'd enjoyed my time there, and enjoyed working with the staff. And I knew the interesting bit was I knew the manager, and I knew the staff around him really well. And then sort of I stepped back to Leicester and took that role as academy director, and it changed straight away. The manager left, Nigel Pearson left, and Claudio Ranieri came in sort of a couple of weeks later. So it was all completely brand new, and again, just gave me another real opportunity to see different people work. Obviously, Claudio brought in a couple of his own staff, but then adapted to some of the people that already existed within the club as well. And we had another complete journey of success where, you know, they went and won the Premier League, and we pushed on in terms of youth development as well. I think we were top of the league for a number of minutes played by young players that year, which was great. And I think for me, just seeing a different type of leader as well. So when Claudio came in, and how he worked, it was quite simple and straightforward, but he was very much about the people rather than your position. So he would always ask about my family and how the girls were, and rather than talking about the football, that the first thing was always about you, the person, which I really valued. And so that was really good, and managed to build up a really good relationship with him and his staff, and we still keep in touch now. But then I also had John Rudkin, who'd been the previous academy director, had stepped up to the role as director of football, and John was really good for me. I think he always questioned and challenged what you were doing, and I think there was times when I got really frustrated with it and thought, God, blimey, he's making this hard work for me. But when I look at it now, he was probably the person that's got me to just think a little bit more about evidencing things, looking for detail, start to see things slightly differently, where, you know, you're not seeing things through your own lens all the time and it's your opinion. So he opened up that wider spectrum for me because of the challenges that he put in place. So yeah, it was fantastic to go back to Leicester, and obviously have that wonderful moment where they won the Premier League, and just being part of the club, I think, during that year was really special. And I think it gave you an opportunity to see what success looked like at an elite level, which and obviously in football it's at the very, very top of the game, which you don't get that opportunity all the time to just see what that looks like. So just to see that was fantastic, and a really great bunch of people across the staff. A real sort of family. And if I see anyone online now, or if I go to another forum and see them, it does bring back memories of that particular time. But for me, just a really good moment in terms of developing as a leader rather than as a coach. To see someone work and engage a group of players, and have a real drive to achieving something, even though the reflection outside was very much no, we want to get to that 40 points. For me, there was a clear mentality of no, we want to achieve success, and I felt he really drove that with the players, and held the group together really well, not just as a group of players, but as a group of staff and whole club. I think everyone felt really very much part of that success.
Yeah, I mean, that's, obviously you had speaking earlier about having Robert Hoof on Saturday, and he was talking about that time obviously as well, and anyone I've spoken to, whether it be staff or I was speaking to Anthony Hurley today, obviously, as you know, who's done very well for himself at the club now, and the director of media. He's a brother of a very good friend of mine, so
Okay.
And obviously, he's seen I mean, his story is unbelievable. What obviously coming through there and all the different things that have gone on at that club. He could write a book, I'm sure, but he's a very modest character. Is Anthony, but just the staff, the nucleus of the staff that were there, and like say with Ranieri, turning to them and allowing them to really help him drive that season. It's a fantastic story, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think it went. I think it was really good, sort of how Claudio developed that relationship with the existing staff, but also the other way around as well. I think Craig Shakespeare and Steve Walsh really engaging with what could have been a really difficult situation, where actually the person that you've worked with has now left the club, and you've got to engage with a new manager and how he wants to do things. I really felt that they bought into that as well, and really contributed. That was really good to see as well. That actually they saw a bigger picture, and it wasn't just about them and what they needed to do and what they needed to achieve. I think they recognised that actually Claudio was a good person, and he made it something that they wanted to be involved in, and completely engage them as part of that.
Yeah, great. And then you end up at your club.
Yes. Yeah, I think obviously we'd been through the winning the league at Leicester, and obviously we started the Champions League campaign, which was excellent, and again a great experience, something that I loved. I had the opportunity to go to the Champions League draw and in Monaco, and it was fantastic, and something that I thoroughly enjoyed. I think there was sort of 4 or 5 of us that went over, and we had sort of 3 or 4 days there. It was great, really good, and so we started that year. We'd gone through a few of the games, and there was an opportunity for me to go to Stoke, and I think I really just wanted to take the opportunity to speak to them, because I'd had some really fond memories of the club, and wanted to sort of see what they'd got to say and see what the opportunity looked like there. And it was quite interesting actually, because I didn't see if you'd sort of said from an academy perspective, how do I view Stoke City? I would probably say I didn't recognise them as a threat at all when I was at Stoke. It was like, actually, I don't think they could take any players off me, or they sort of existed, but didn't. And but really had fond memories of the club, and always sort of kept an eye on results. And then the chief exec got in touch with me, asked if I'd meet with himself and the owners, and so I took him up on that opportunity. And I think they made a real effort to want to get me to the club, and it was almost even though some great work had gone on prior to me coming in there, it was almost like a blank sheet of paper. And they said, look, we want some success on the development of players. We feel like we're in a good position. They'd had a really good audit score prior to me coming in, but there wasn't any productivity coming through. So I think Ollie Shenton had played about 30 seconds of a game in the last 10 years, and no one had come through prior to that. So they just sort of said, look, we need someone to come into the building and start developing players. We need to have some sort of outcomes from that. So I met with them, and I also met with the technical director who focused on the sort of recruitment side of the club. We met and talked about players and who we could bring in, and what development and recruitment would look like, and did we feel we could work together? And I think we got on really well, and felt that there was a good opportunity there. So yeah, I made the move to Stoke, which to be honest was great. I loved being at Stoke. When I first went there, we had Mark Hughes in post, and his staff were always great with me. Obviously, Mark and Eddie are now at Reading, and doing well there, and Glyn is now head coach at Wimbledon, and I shared an office with Glyn, and that was fantastic. It was really good. He probably gave me a foot in the door to speak to the manager, be involved on match days, and it was good. It enabled us to really build that relationship, and for me to be able to talk openly and honestly about what I wanted to do with players, and understand what the blocker was from their side. So saying, look, we've got some technically good players. What's stopping them coming through? And they explained that clearly to me. So it meant that we changed some of the training methods, and I think they could see that we were really making an effort to try and engage with them to get players through. And we had this real sort of flurry of opportunities to try and get players over to the first team. And I think over the sort of 3 years, we had a sort of flurry of managers towards the end. But all of them, I think, understood that as a club we'd got we'd implemented a clear philosophy about how we wanted to play, what we wanted to do, what our DNA was, and the vision. We made absolutely clear that we wanted to get 35% of the first team squad. We wanted it to be academy players. The bit that I felt had an influence on was when I went in there, they'd got a really good score in the academy audits, so the EPPP process, and they'd got some great people in the building. So probably the largest number of UEFA Pro licensed coaches I'd seen in an academy, and an A licensed coaches. I think Jimmy Hunter, their head of coaching, had done a really good job in terms of developing the coaching staff. And then from a sports science perspective, they've got masters, PhDs. The head of sports science had done a really good job of developing those staff. The bit that was probably missing was, okay, what is it we're here for? So I would have called it a high performance environment, and we needed to make it a high performing environment. We needed a shift in, yeah, we're here to produce players. So actually there's got to be that as an outcome. We've got to produce players for our first team. And it was really probably not making too much of a difference in terms of what the coaching looks like. That can continue. It's very good. I think people are excellent on the grass. I don't need to be out there all the time influencing that. They were very, very good. And the bit that I felt I really needed to make clear was, look, this is Stoke City Football Club. We're a Premier League club. We're very good. We're going to set a vision. I went in there initially and I said, look, I want us to be world leading. And I remember sitting in front of a room of staff saying, look, I want us to be, as a club, I want us to be world leading. I said, pop your hand up if you don't think we can be world leading. And everyone in the room put their hand in the air. And I was like, oh, okay, what are we going to do? So then it was very much around, okay, well, what's our vision going to look like? So we held a number of consultation meetings with different members of staff, and we split up into small groups. And we got to the point of, we wanted it to, we got a clear picture of, right, we wanted 25% of the first team to be made up of academy players. So I went and then presented it to the owners and to the board, and so this is what we want it to look like. And it was great, actually, because they came back and said, actually, we'd like it to be 35%. We thought they'd knock us down, and actually they bumped it up. And for me, that was probably a great moment, because I went back to the staff and just went, look, particularly the academy staff, and just went, look, they're buying into what you guys are doing. They think you're doing the right things. So, they genuinely feel you can do it. So let's make that our vision. 35%. We're going to work on just getting players through. So we set that as our vision, and then had a clear mission of developing and maintaining a high performing environment rather than a high performance environment. It's going to be a high performing environment. So as soon as we start getting a player through, it can't stop there. We've got to continue maintaining that. So we had that as our mission, and then we had a number of objectives. The sort of two clear ones being develop and recruit elite players, which is obvious, and then the other one for me was my part was develop and recruit elite staff. Okay, so if we can't recruit the best person, we'll get the best we possibly can, and we'll develop that individual, so that actually the influence on the players is going to be tenfold as well. And then off the back of that, we produced a performance model, and everyone in the academy contributed to that, and everyone at the club contributed to that. This is what it's going to look like. And then we defined everyone's roles and responsibilities across the club, in terms of what you do, what do you do on a daily basis, what's your roles and responsibilities. And then probably the one bit where I sort of said, look, this is non-negotiable, and I'm going to put this in, was what I call a central aim. And I'd done a study on it for my pro license, and it was really that, if you go into a lot of organisations or you go into a lot of clubs, there's something that really sort of says, this is what we do on a daily basis. And I always liken it to when Kennedy did his tour around NASA, and he asked the janitor what his job role was, and he said, oh, my job's to put people on the moon. So although his job was cleaning the toilets and making sure the basins were nice and shiny, he recognised that his role contributed to something even bigger. So we had a central aim around productivity. So whatever your job was, whether you worked in the kitchens, whether you cleaned the building, whether you were a youth coach, whether you were a senior coach in the building, whatever it was, your job was to put players on the pitch. It was going to be productivity. And then we set a number of targets around that as well. So the number of training minutes that we were going to maintain, how many players would be involved with the first team on a squad basis. So whether they'd just travel with them away just to get in and around it, whether that be on a match day and be involved in the squad or the first 11. What did the loans program look like? And then that became basically the agenda for our technical board. So then we managed that performance arena from our technical board around what it was going to look like. So it was really good. Probably the biggest challenge was we started to then get players through, which was great. But then was probably the impact on the first team. Could we get the balance right? And I think first year they finished, I think it was 14th. Might have been slightly higher than that. And then obviously we got relegated in the in the second year. Probably the balance wasn't quite right with the senior players that we'd brought into the building, which again is another learning curve, and starting to recognise those things and what high performance looks like. But I think in terms of sustainability and producing players, I think we really moved into a really good space. And I think the bit for me as well, obviously, in terms of success, we had I think we had 7 players in 18 months come through at the academy. I think they're probably around about 10 at the moment that have come through. So it was a really good productivity rate that we'd produced. We got to an FA Youth Cup semi-final, but for me, it was probably the people in the building that we developed. So a number of coaches, sports scientists went on to more senior roles, or went on to other clubs. So some went to international federations, some went to bigger clubs in the Premier League. And then obviously when I left, there was an opportunity for Gareth Owen to then step up into that academy director's position, and I was 100% behind that as well. I really felt that even when I came into the building, I recognised some of the qualities that Gareth had got working with the foundation phase, and not just as a coach, but how he managed people, and really felt that he could drive the next performance. And I think at the time when I got offered the position at FIFA and there was an opportunity to leave, I think I probably recognised that Gareth would probably drive that even further than where I was at that time as well. That actually it was probably a good changeover period, and Gareth would be the person that could then take it to another level again. And from what I see, I think that's happened. They've had continued success. There's still young players coming through at the club, so that's been for me a real highlight that the people also progressed as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Yeah, I mean, Gareth obviously spoke very, very well when we had him on the webinar a few weeks back. Him and Rich. It was you can see what you've left in there, and he's moved into the success they're having is great. And then so how the FIFA role? How did that come about? Did you ever anticipate that? Did you see that 5 years down the line I want to be working at FIFA? Or how did it all materialise?
No, I think I think in my mind I'd always sort of thought about being in the club environment and continuing that. And obviously I was head of the technical board, and thought I just saw my pathway at either another club or developing as like a head of football at a club or a director of football at a club. And then it was quite a strange one, to be honest. I'd done a mentoring program with the Premier League, and we'd gone through this process of them sort of going, right, well, what do you want to do? Where do you want to get to? What does that look like? And so I really got grilled about going, no, what is it that you want to do? And so I talked about things like, okay, I want to have some success in the game, and I want to be able to, my family to be able to enjoy that success, and looking at the work-life balance as well. And I suppose he just sort of really got me to reflect on what I wanted to do. And so I talked about I wanted to have an impact on global sport, and he was like, that's really good. He said it's ambitious. You've not just siloed yourself with football either. You've talked about sport in general, and not just developing the athlete, but developing people within sport or the game. And while I was going through that process, and a recruitment company in Australia, funny enough, contacted me and said, "Oh, look, we're not," and they'd spoke to me probably 2 years prior about a role that had been available, and it'd not really been too much interest to me. And they'd kept in touch over the next sort of couple of years, and they contacted me and said, "Oh, we just thought we'd let you know it's not a role that we're recruiting for, but FIFA are advertising a job, and we think it actually suits your skill set. Obviously, it's nothing to do with us, but we just thought we'd make you aware of that position." So they made me aware of the role. So I went and looked at the job, and yeah, it sounded something I was really interested in. This head of technical leadership at FIFA. Probably thought it was a little out of my reach at the time, to be honest. But looked at it and thought, actually, it'd be a really interesting process to go through. And if I can get an interview, I'd be pleased with that. That'd be really good. And then it took around 8 months to go through the interview process. So there's a number of panel interviews, and a number of individual one-to-one and small team interviews as well, that I went through, and probably as we went through each stage, just became more and more confident that actually I was doing quite well, but also felt comfortable, because I think the first time I'd gone to FIFA in Zurich, and you walk up to that building, it's quite daunting, and you walk in, and the entrance hall's really really open, and there's World Cup games playing, and they've got the World Cup there being displayed, and it's sort of quite daunting. And I do remember sort of I think I had probably 3 interviews at this stage, and I'd been made to wait. There was a FIFA board meeting taking place, and I was meeting with Zvonimir Boban, which is daunting on its own, but then having to wait a number of hours before it. I phoned my brother, and just was like, "All right, I'm waiting. Nothing's happened yet." And he just went, "What are you nervous about?" And I was like, "Oh, it's a really good job." And I said, I've built on my enthusiasm to want to do that role as we've gone through. And he was like, "Yeah," he said, "What an opportunity you've had already, that you've been to these interviews. He said, you're getting to meet Zvonimir Boban. This is great. So just go and enjoy it. Just really good." And I was like, "Do you know what? I say this, and I've said this to the players for years. Well, guys, just relax, enjoy it, enjoy the experience. It's going to help you later on. There'll be another opportunity that'll come along that actually, if you get knocked back, it'll." And almost went through that. Yeah. Do you know what? You've been telling this to the players for years now. Actually, practice what you preach. Go and really enjoy the opportunity." So there was a number of people in the room along with Zvonimir, and I knew it must be coming down to the sort of final few. And so the interview started, and we started talking, and then Zvonimir started asking me questions about the game, and it became completely that, where it was just me and him talking. And he just said, "All right," he said to everyone else, "You can leave us now. We're fine. We're just going to talk about football." And that was it. We were in the room on our own, and we had a whiteboard up and started drawing out our own ideas and what we thought games should look like and how teams should play. And he wanted to know about my experiences, and yeah, we just sort of started. It was almost like being with an old colleague from being in a club, and someone that was really enthused by the game. And then a few days later, I was offered the position, which was great. But again, a daunting experience and completely different from my job role in clubs. So I've got this responsibility now for developing technical directors in member associations, and which looks completely different as well across the whole of the world. If you take working with Les Reed in England compared to going into working with, the last couple of days I've been working with countries in the Caribbean and the Oceania Islands. It's chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
So you have to be really aware of cultural differences, the people, what the country looks like, how you work with them. So sort of going into that role, there was that sort of really daunting prospect of, actually, you don't know too much about this at the moment. It's almost sort of like starting out again. But it's been a fantastic pathway. As as an organisation, they're hugely supportive of you. There was an opportunity to be part of the think tank as well, which has been great. And Arsene Wenger sits on that with Stephen Martin as the technical director. We throw ideas around about what the future game should look like. So it's been a huge, a really, really good experience. And I still keep very close to the game and can influence performance domains in different countries, both in clubs and at national team level. We have a 3-course program at FIFA with the technical director. The sort of initial one really is around the scope of the role, so we get them to understand what the scope of the technical director's role is. So even though recruitment's done very well in the UEFA Confederation and is supported very well within the confederations, a lot of them will appoint someone that's been they've either been a national team player or they've been a national team coach, and then they get dropped into this role as technical director. So they've been involved in the elite game for a long period of time and not exposed to what grassroots football looks like or what the female game looks like compared to the male game. How we have this double pyramid of amateur and professional football taking place. What's the interactions between the both? So we have the initial courses really around that, them understanding what the scope of their role is and the different what football looks like in different contexts. And then we have two additional pathways. So one's around leadership and management, which is again very interesting because some of them have been international team managers or managers within a club environment, and then they move into this leadership capacity in a workspace. So they're managing different types of people and find it a real struggle to transfer some of their skills and knowledge across. So that always becomes quite interesting. And then we have another pathway which is around the technical, which is the nice bit, and it keeps you in touch with the game. And so we have sort of 3 core strands of that one being coach education, one being talent ID, and one being elite player development. And then when we run the course programs, they're usually based in a single confederation with all of the member associations coming in. And there's an opportunity to really sort of look at football in their country, and we literally go through that, where there's a day where coach education takes place, usually at a senior level, an A license program or pro license, and then we get to look at elite youth development. So we get to look at training in practice and what that looks like for the technical director, how they should be viewing it. And then we usually have something around a game as well. So how do we transfer practice into performance? And we get to look at that both within a club and a national team level. So you get that. That's well, from my perspective, it's perfect because I love the game and want to be involved in the grass part and have an influence on that. But I also love the leadership and education part and want to have a grasp on that. So I get to really sort of engage with both my passions. So it's in terms of a role, it's excellent, and it's given me a real diverse network in terms of knowledge in the game and how people see it completely differently. But there's no right and wrong, and it's people really getting that context right and understanding what fits in that particular moment at that particular time. And I think the real elite people, they get that right more often than not.
Brilliant. Yeah. We had a webinar on Monday, actually, our company, but it was the cricket side of the company. It was with Jason Holder of the West Indies. And he said exactly that about the context. The question was around leadership. And he said it's all dependent on the context of who you're managing, who you're looking to lead. It was very interesting. So that just struck a chord then when he talked about that. Particularly talking about obviously the different confederations that you work with. That's a huge role, isn't it? How does it? Who looks after? How many people underneath do you who work?
So I'm in the technical division. So actually at FIFA on a day-to-day basis, we've only got 2 additional people in the team. So we have a German guy called Philipp Zimmermann, who's come from a rugby background, unbelievably enough, but an extremely clever guy, really good. And I'm hoping it's the environment I've created, because he feels very comfortable challenging some of my decision making, and he questions me on things, and it's great because he does get me to see things slightly differently. So very good. And then we have Alexandra Huipe Ramos, who's a Spanish lady that's come into the team, and again has been excellent since she's come in. She came in almost an operational role, but has really probably driven her own development as well. So she's now become a core part of the delivery team. So she wants to speak to people. She's delivered some of the work of our online workshops as well. So they're the people that we've got on a daily basis in the building. Across the whole division, we're obviously split into different departments. There's probably around 50, I would say. But they're the two people that I work with on a core basis, day in, day out. And then we have a team of experts that work for us. And then we've got, so that's probably about another 20 people that are based globally. So they're all over the world, and they deliver not just our course programs, but they also deliver a mentoring program as well. So we have a mentoring program that we developed with the technical directors that started this year, and it's really about supporting some of the transfer of knowledge that they learn on the course program into practice. What we find, and I've found this, to be honest, with lots of different coaching programs and academic programs, and when I go and look at other leadership or executive programs, that actually people have got the knowledge in their head and they can talk about it really well, and if I question on it, they're really good. But then when you look at any evidence of what's being produced, they're doing the same things day in, day out. So actually you go, actually there's a blocker there, there's something that's not transferring that knowledge across. And sometimes they'll blame other people. They'll say, oh, actually my director won't let me implement this. And so now I started questioning that a little bit and saying, okay, well, look at yourself first. Okay, so are your negotiation skills not good enough to be able to implement that and negotiate with that director or with that board or the governance that are in place? Can you not negotiate that, or do you not present your information well enough? And so we're really starting to get the technical director really to probably go through the process that I've talked about during my development, start to really reflect on what you do and how you work, and accept other people's views and why they're different, and to hopefully just get them to becoming not just a better learner, but being able to develop their practice through the knowledge transfer.
Right. And work, it must be challenging, because in England, club football, particularly academy football, it tends to be mainly British working in those environments, isn't it? So to come out from, it's a little bit different at first team level, but obviously to come out of that and then to work with German, Spanish, how's that been?
This is my biggest challenge, Chris. Is languages. So I think everyone at FIFA probably speaks 4 or 5 different languages, which is great. I went in there and I could only speak English, and I'd probably say in our department, probably Spanish is spoken the most. I'd say. So I have Spanish lessons on a daily basis, to be honest. Yeah, so I have group lessons at FIFA and I have a private lesson as well. And they make it part of my working day to have Spanish and to speak Spanish, and it's a real challenge. I think I understand a lot of what's going on now, obviously, and the same with German as well. I understand a lot of the conversation, but probably can't join in. Philip and Alex become very, very useful to me in some meetings that are going on where I'm like nudging them under the table to say, what are they talking about now? It's gone somewhere I don't know. So that was probably a real big challenge for me. But I think obviously the useful part is that most places speak English. which is great. It doesn't help for me learning because everyone just don't want to see you struggle. They'll jump in and tell me in English. But I think probably more than just dealing with the language thing has been understanding different cultures. And you know, you will have experienced this, and you know, you may have made that move now in what, 2004 was it that you went over there? You know, the cultural differences between certain places where I had a room of, I delivered to a number of the Asian confederations sort of quite early on when I'd started at FIFA. We delivered a technical program, and we were in the classroom talking about coach education, and no one would look at me. They'd literally head down and wouldn't look up. And I was like, oh, blimey, this is really difficult. I've got to build a relationship with these guys. And but then when I went one-to-one with them, they were great, really engaged, would look you in the eye. You could have really good conversations with them. Even if there was an interpreter there, like you could see that there was that engagement and relationship. And then, our regional guy said to me, I said, oh, they won't look you in the eye when you're in a classroom with them because it's disrespectful. They think they're disrespecting you so just understanding some of those little differences of where you're going to deliver. And so now I take quite a bit of time, if we're delivering a course program, to actually think about what the cultural differences are and how I'm going to engage the person or the people in the room. What does learning look like in their country? Understanding football. So going back to that bit around the context. Even going to Switzerland, where I think in a club environment there's a hierarchy that exists, where where you sit in the system, and there's certain people you perhaps wouldn't challenge as in FIFA. Now, whether it's the place or the country, I'm not sure, but you've got a clear, where you sit in the system, but it's very open and people want you to challenge them, and it's almost as if it doesn't exist when you're debating something. You could challenge the president, you could challenge Arsene, I could challenge Stephen, the technical director, and they're comfortable with that. You're on a level, and certainly Philip and Alex, who are in the office with me on a daily basis, they feel comfortable with that with me as well. It's not me just making the decisions. Everyone's part of it, and I think if you think about sort of diversity of knowledge and not just thinking what's in your own head, it's a great environment to be in.
Yeah. I mean, from a self-development point of view, it must be massive. I completely know where you're coming from as well with that. It just reminded me some of the work we've done with the Ministry of Education out here, and we'd have people presenting to a room of teachers, head teachers, and there'd be groups just talking amongst themselves while the presenter's talking, and and it is you just have to adapt to that, and you just have to get used to it. So that would be pretty astonishing when you're working with all the different confederations there. I've got a few really good questions from some really good people here, so I'd like to ask them. So I don't want to keep you all night. I'm sure your girls won't be too happy with me. So, I mean, I could keep talking to us forever, but I might have to give you a phone call another day on that. But
no problem.
The first one's from Rob Wadsworth. Rob is the director of the Nadashiba Sports Complex out here, so it's Sheikh Hamdan's facility. Not that I'm actually supposed to say that, Rob, so apologies about that. It's a very important facility anyway. But Gareth, you discussed challenges you faced at Leicester under John Rudkin. How did you manage the effects of those frustrations and challenges on your own mental state and motivation, and how you responded?
Yeah, I think probably sometimes I didn't handle it as well as I should have done, and I think that's probably part of my development as a leader, that I need to recognise that, where you probably have some real heated conversations at times, and well, to be honest, there's a particular instance that I went through, and it wasn't with John, where I spoke to a senior board member at another club, and we got into a huge debate, and something that they wanted to change at the club that I felt was going to have a really big impact on players. And I think the emotions engaged, it became really heated, and because he was the senior person, he got his way, and that was the decision that I made. And I think I sort of came away from that meeting, and ones that I've done since then, and ones with John as well, where I now think, do you know what? If I'd have really controlled those emotions and thought about it properly, my responses would come across a lot clearer. There'd be clarity in my argument, and I probably would have got the decision through. So as it was in that particular club, in that instance, I felt the players suffered because I couldn't then conduct a conversation correctly and control my own emotions. So it was definitely a learning point for me that actually I really need to, for one, I need to reflect and think about those things. Two, plan out conversations before they happen is really useful as well, because you can take some of the emotion away from it. But three, I think just be aware of how you're feeling when you're speaking to people, or you're emotionally engaged in something. I become, particularly if I'm teaching in the classroom, I'm quite enthusiastic about things, and when I speak to coaches about when they work with players, about actually take the emotion out of it, have clarity in the instruction that you're giving to them, the direction, and how you're going to work. And you've got to be the same in a leadership role as well, that actually you need to step away and sort of get some real clarity over what your argument is, and be prepared that other people will have different views. And I think if you go away and really reflect on it properly as well, you can probably understand people's views, when you really think about it. I've certainly done that when I've come away from arguments, and the one that I've just spoken about, I can now think about it from a board level perspective, that actually he had a really, really good case for arguing that way. But I still felt I could have won it if I'd got clarity of mind.
Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from with that emotion. It's very difficult, isn't it, sometimes to separate that. But thank you for that. Chris, your friend Chris Mosley, how do you deal with renegade players who have different ways to channel their talents?
Yeah, really, really difficult. There was a certain player at Stoke that moved on because he didn't really fit our values of the club, and we probably should have managed the individual better because he had such an influence on the performance side. It's very, very difficult. I genuinely think as a leader, if you've got values, you need to instill them, and they should really guide your decision-making process. I think you've really got to look at the individual and not make decisions on them based on your own experiences, because they will have come through life and had a different type of experience. How their parents have brought them up, what they experienced at school, how they've been dealt with as a young player coming through, whether that be in their grassroots as club as they're developed, or the club that they've come through, what their pathways look like. So just think about some of the experiences that they faced before really sort of going, right, this is the decision that we're going to make, this is what we're going to do with you. Really think about it from their perspective. And if you can get them doing the same, if you can really get them to reflect on why they are the person that they are, I think that can have huge benefits on an individual. And so I spoke about the mentoring program we have with technical directors. We take quite a bit of time in terms of pairing up the right people. So who's going to work best with that person? Who's going to be the person that gets the best out of that particular individual? I think clubs need to spend a lot of time on that as well. Just thinking about, okay, so sometimes it's not the head coach or the first team manager that deals with that renegade player best because of the seniority that they hold. Actually, they might have a better relationship with someone else. You might do it through another player at the club. You might do it through the physiotherapist who actually spends a lot of one-to-one time with the players. They might be the best person to be able to deal with that. I think really thinking about actually who's the best influence or who can support that individual the best is probably a really good way to go about it.
Yeah, it's a great point. You know Taff Raymond? Have you come
Yes.
Yes, you know.
Yeah, I know Taff.
Yeah, so Taff's come and delivered a couple of courses for us, for coach education courses with English FA. And that's what I found. He sets a fantastic environment during the courses, but he always does that. He buddies people up doing the courses really well. He takes a lot of time with that. And I've got a lot of time for Taff as it is. You know, I think he's very good with his coach education. And
Yeah.
so it's always good to see him work. Another Middlesbrough ledge here, Mark Tinkler. Hi, Chris. Could you ask Gareth the first thing? Could you ask Gareth what the first thing he looks for in his staff when he goes into the club as academy director? Cheers, Tinks.
Yeah. So, yeah, I've got a really sort of clear answer for this. So when I first went to Stoke, I had someone that I thought was an absolute standout individual that I'd interviewed. I'm sure he won't mind me mentioning him in this instance because he was standout, and there was something that really stood out about him. So Wade Elliott had been the captain at Bristol City when I'd been there as academy director, and I interviewed him for the under 23s job at Stoke, and I'd got a number of people that I spoke to, and 2 or 3 that the manager had put forward as well that were good friends and quite high profile people, and all had outstanding capabilities as a coach. And the bit that sort of stood out for me was when I spoke to Wade, he'd got like a curiosity to develop, and almost like meeting a young player for the first time. He was that Wade, and I was like, oh my God, this guy's been a Premier League player. And I think it's 500 odd appearances. And, you know, in his own right, he might have thought, you know, I deserve this job. I've gone through the system. I've worked hard as a player. And Wade was probably just something different that I'd not seen before, that he'd got this curiosity to develop himself and wanted to be the best possible coach he could be, and you could see he was studying academic programs. His application, when it came in, it was like a 10,000 word dissertation on, you know, how he wanted to develop the game and what he wanted to do. And I've got to say he was probably less experienced than some of the people that I'd spoken to about that role. So the first thing I look for is a real people that want to develop. It's not just about what they've done in the past and what qualifications they've done, but actually they've got a real desire to grow. Yeah,
brilliant. And Michael Brady, he manages a team in the UAE second division, and he's always on the webinars, which is great to see. You talked about reflecting your and each other's work. What's your biggest strength and biggest weakness from self-reflection throughout your whole education?
Yeah, I think the one that I spoke about with the emotion bit and being able to manage that correctly was probably the biggest learning curve in terms of as a leader. I think I'd almost mastered it as a coach, and I could understand the environment I was in and working with players and how, but I'd still got that emotional edge to going into conversations. So that was probably my biggest learning curve. I would say my biggest weekness. I need to come up with one so I don't sound too arrogant. I would probably say I probably spread myself a little bit too thinly. I think when I'm trying to manage things. So I think quite recently, particularly with the COVID part, it's around really thinking about, right, what are your priorities now, and really understanding what those priorities for, even if it means upsetting a few people, that actually you need to park them on one side for now and really sort of channel, right, this is what needs to get done. I think probably that I'm still, I would say, I'm a lot better, but I've never really liked conflict too much. Not something that I feel really comfortable with. I don't have a problem with it now. I can deal with it, but it's still something that, you know, I don't enjoy. I'll think about, you know, if it's going to be a conflicting a conversation where there's going to be some conflict take place, I do really think about now, right, where's this going to take place? Does holding it in my office have a little bit of the upper hand, or an environment that I feel really comfortable in have the upper hand? I think when I first started implementing performance models, I probably didn't recognize how much it was going to drive performance. I think the initial thoughts were, do you know what, this cuts out some conflict because people have got really defined roles and clear responsibilities about what they've got to achieve. Rather than me having to argue out with them, I can go, oh, is it on the performance model? Why are we doing it? These are the reasons why. If not, why not? We can have a conversation about that. So that almost sort of took a bit of the conflict away from me. So I think that was probably a bit of a challenge at a particular point in my career. So no, good question. I think the reflection part is really important. I think as I came through as well, the bit that I found really difficult at first was probably when you start to realise there's people that are a lot better than you at certain things, and you think, yeah, actually, because certainly as a young person, you come through and almost think you're indestructible, and I'm really good at this, and you try and blow your own trumpet a little bit. And particularly as a coach, because I've been and got my A license and pro license, and then I went into some really good clubs, you know, Bristol City and Leicester City and Stoke City, where I was like, do you know what? There's some coaches that are miles better than me. So actually, I need to leave them to it. And if there's an opportunity for me to develop them as an individual, brilliant. But you have to be quite humble, and hopefully that's added some humility to how I work now as a leader.
Brilliant. And just one more question, is that all right? Have you got time?
Yeah, it's plenty. Yeah, no problem at all.
Great, thank you. Murray Jones, good to see Murray Jones on again. And he's put, Gareth, what kind of barriers are there with developing small federations and associations?
Okay, I think one is obviously there's some financial difficulties for them. I think particularly if they've got so Oceania is a really good example of that, where there's some small confederations, and the distances they have to travel for an individual fixture is really hard. A lot of these smaller federations don't have the elite league programs available to them, so any players then travel outside of that member association or confederation to go and play their football, which then becomes really difficult to develop the elite game in that country. But I think one of the ones is a bit like a Stoke City, really, where you go, actually, almost that belief of we could be something special, we could grow further. And I think the football is it's dominated at the moment by that UEFA Confederation, certainly. And I think obviously there's times when football in South America and CONMEBOL that has an impact, particularly at world stage level. But we're going through a program at the minute, a high performance program that we're developing at FIFA, and we're looking at sort of trying to narrow that gap. So we're doing some ecosystem analysis at the moment around the elite game and what high performance looks like in every country in the world, both from academy, league systems, international perspective. And we're looking at trying to narrow the gap, because what tends to happen, a lot of the smaller confederations actually perform quite well. So if we took New Zealand, for example, as a member association, They qualified for the Under-20 World Cup, and the performances were great, which is fantastic. But then they don't ever qualify for the Senior World Cup. So what happens then from Under-20s to becoming to the senior level? And for one, they don't have an elite league system. The distances they have to travel for games is unbelievable. So we're really going to look at, right, well, what do we do then if they're qualifying for World Cups at youth level? What does that look like when it gets to the elite level? What's the transfer? What are some of the barriers that are facing all the way, to really understand what's happening, so that we can have hopefully some additional projects that we'll develop at the end of the year to try and address that as well. And whether that's a new funding model, whether that's put in an elite coaches program into that region, whether it's designing a league system which links together additional federations, whatever that may look like. But no, it's a great question, and there's some really, really big challenges, there's really big challenges for all of the member associations, particularly now with COVID. But from a technical director perspective, the ones that are in senior member associations that are sort of heads of the global game, if you like, they have equally as many challenges being at the top end of the game as those in the smaller confederations. Something that's sort of really helping the technical director is that we're now trying to bring them all together, and they understand what those challenges are. They can face them together. They've got the support mechanism in place to be able to do that. So, but no, it's a really, really good question.
Yeah, something where on my travels with work is, when I've gone east and speaking to the likes of like the Australian team manager and what have you, is that the catch up of the Asian countries, they seem to be making, like your Vietnams and Thailands, people like that. They seem to be, particularly in the eyes of Australia, I know that they're playing catch up on a very, very quick basis. But I'm sure that I suppose the constraints that might be there around not necessarily the grassroots football, but I suppose that from the grassroots football into elite level, when you're dealing with such vast countries, are pretty big.
Yeah, it's I think it's a really big challenge now. I've been doing some work recently with around the technical directors program and what the sort of modern day or the future leader looks like, and we talk about we talk about things that people know, so like the authentic leader, so being humble and open and honest, and but probably something that we don't talk enough about is this sort of the systemic thinker. So someone that really recognizes opportunities, and there's probably never been a point in time that this has been more relevant, because we've got people now, because of the virus, that are a lot of people aren't working, or if they are, they understand what's going on in their local town or their local city, so they know what's going on there. They're looking at what's happening in other parts of their country, because they want to see what the virus is doing in the rest of the country, because they know it's going to affect them. They're going and looking at what's happening in their region, so whether that's Asia or Europe or whatever it may be. They're looking in their region about what's happening. And then they're looking globally as well. So they're going and seeing what the pandemic's doing in America. Now, we need to do this on a daily basis about our job. So in terms of the football mind and where we think, we need to start thinking, okay, well, what does this look like in my country? What does it look like nationally in my country? What are they doing over there in our region? What's happening globally in the game? And really almost sort of study it like we're studying the pandemic, because people seem to know the figures inside out and what's happening where, and that's how we need to study the game. That's, the modern day leader will start to understand that and start to think about it, and almost start to think about, right, where do I fit in the system? And I've placed it in a bubble there, because I've placed it in football. The ones that are really systemic thinkers will think outside of that as well. Okay, so what's happening in schools now in my country? is there an opportunity to link the football programme with schools, because a certain thing is happening, and that will offer additional development opportunities for our country. What's happening in the health system locally for our club? Is there any way we could contribute to that? That might then offer a new pathway for our doctors or health staff within clubs to develop. Those that think systemically, I think, will be the modern day leader. Yeah,
no, it's brilliant. It's been absolutely fascinating talking to you, Gareth. I could go on, like I say, but I have to catch up with you another time. So I've got plenty of questions myself there. But really appreciate your time coming on. It's been great catching up with you again. What are you up to this evening? Are you in the garden again?
Yeah, I think I need to be careful with the rays. I've got a little bit of a glow. I think it's sort of built up as well the more I've been inside. So I just think I'll go and see the girls. I think we're going to go out for our evening of exercise, and I still need to grab some dinner as well. So I'll grab some of that en route. Yeah, brilliant. I just want to apologise to yourself and everyone else on this evening about the issues that I had at the start. Thanks for holding fort there, Gareth. I thought at one point you might have to do the full hour. So I'll be on to the telecommunications people this evening about what's happened there. No problem at all.
But thanks everyone. On Saturday we've got Jack Collinson talking about his career in the game and unfortunately cut short due to injury, and why now he swapped coaching at West Ham for coaching over in the States at Atlanta. So interested to hear about that. But thanks again, Gareth. I will speak to you shortly and appreciate your time tonight.
No, thank you very much, Chris. It's been a pleasure coming on, and if you ever want me to come back on and speak, I'm more than happy. Or if you want to speak to anyone else at FIFA, just give me a shout.
Oh, top man. Thank you very much. Take care, mate.
Perfect. Take care. Thanks, guys. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.